Thank you. There's popcorn downstairs. Andre's downstairs, and up here we've got Mr. Mark Bates. Now, Mark is a big person with a big smile who loves big hugs.
It's true.
Bring it here.
True.
Bring it here.
Ah.
Bring it here.
The big booming bear hug.
He's author of Programming and CoffeeScript. He's Paul McCartney's cousin, but don't ask him to sing. Please welcome Mark Bates.
Thanks, Josh. See, that's why I wanted Josh to give me an introduction. I am not Paul McCartney's cousin, but ask me later, and I do have a really, really good Paul McCartney story for you. I am also not Ryan Bates, if that's what you're expecting to see. That is not me. Hi, Josh. Thanks for coming. I am the author of 3 books, actually, Programming and CoffeeScript, Distributed Programming with Ruby, and my latest, Conquering the Command Line. And I have some to give away. Ooh. And this is what it looks like when you win one. Very excited. And this is me not trying to bash my head on this thing, by the way. So if I suddenly fall unconscious, you know what happened. So like I said, I do have a couple to give away. I'm also before I do that, though, I'm also the voice behind a site called metacast.tv. Which is kind of a weekly screencast site and does Rails and Ruby and JavaScript and Postgres and Go and all sorts of fun stuff. Use Ruby AU 2014, get yourself a free month, enjoy it, learn about a bunch of stuff. So before I go and give away books and before we actually dive into mini tests, right? I know who here went to the GitHub drink up last night? GitHub and Stripe drink up, right? Good number of people. Who here flew in from really far away very recently? Okay. And who here is just generally tired this morning? That's what I thought. Okay, so let's all stand up. See, if you all said you weren't tired, we wouldn't do this. Let's all stand up. There we go. Let's get the blood flowing. Everybody stand up. Come on. Heroku t-shirt, stand up. It's a small room. You're on the aisle. Okay, so let's all reach up into the sky. There you go. Reach up. Heroku t-shirt. There you go. All right, let's all do some twists. Do some twists. Everybody do some twists. Some nice little stretches. There you go. Oh, that felt good. You feel good, right? You're waking up a little bit. That's good. That's what I want people to do. Okay, now everybody, let's stay standing here for a minute. All right, because today we're going to take a big look at mini test. All right? This is the green dot. As Rubyists, we all love the green dot. I'll be honest, my wife is here with me in Sydney. If she wasn't, I'd be making out with the green dot in my hotel room when I go back at night. That's how much I love the green dot. Right? Nothing makes us feel better than to see a bunch of green dots going across our screen. Right? Red dots make us sad, green dots make us happy. When you see a screen like this, we all know that we can sleep very well at night. Right? We know that our code is perfect and wonderful and very well tested. Okay, maybe not perfect, especially if you're writing Zach's code, but it's, it's at least well tested. Right? And these green dots make us happy. And yes? Oh, Simon didn't say, but you can move up front. The seat's up here. You can sit down if you like, but I'm not encouraging it. So anyway, so the first thing we do when we set up a new project, at least the first thing we should do if we set up a new project, is to set up a testing framework, right? And it's at this point, there you go. You know what? Everybody can sit down except for you two. You two won books. Everybody can sit down. So come see me afterwards and you guys can grab some books. So normally I wait till everybody sits down, the last 2 people standing get the books. But you guys showed such initiative to want to actually see what I was talking about. Which is kind of disturbing in a little way as well. So anyway, so the first thing we should do when we start a new project is to set up a testing framework. And it's at this point that you usually think to yourself, oh my God, I should write my own testing framework. Because how hard could it be? Who here has thought that before? I should write my own testing framework. At least one person, 2, 3. Right? You're lying if you say you haven't thought how hard could it be. I'm here to say please don't. Right? And I'll tell you why. There's a site called the Ruby Toolbox. Has anybody here, who here hasn't heard of the Ruby Toolbox? Okay, everybody has heard of it. Fantastic, right? It's an amazing site written by a big hulking German guy named Christoph, unpronounceable last name. If you see Christoph, unpronounceable last name, dead serious on Twitters, buy him a drink. He smokes a lot, he drinks a lot, so he'll be very amenable to the drinking. But buy him a drink, because he deserves a good drink. He does a lot of good stuff. He also wrote SimpleCov. But Ruby Toolbox is a great place to go and say, I'm looking for a new plugin for my app. I want to add tags to my application. What's the latest and greatest tags plugin? And this kind of gives you a lot of information here. So here's the minitest one, for example. It tells you the last time it was updated, how many commits, how many downloads, that sort of stuff. Really helps you get a good idea of what these plugins are and what they do. So I did a little search for testing, unit testing plugins. This is some of the ones that I found through the Ruby toolbox. I'm really concerned about hitting my head on this thing. And so, I know RSpec, minitest, TestUnit, bacon, and it starts getting a bit wonky as we go along here. So other people have had your idea, and I'm here to tell you don't do it, right? And the reason why is we already have minitest. Minitest is already with us, and it's with us every day, and we don't even know it. Most people don't realize we have it. Good things come in small packages. We can all agree, right? The Mini Cooper. Everybody loves the Mini Cooper. Mini Me. Who doesn't love Mini Me? Those little bottles of booze you get in an airplane that when you hold them, you feel like a giant as you go stumbling down the aisle and then pass out by the stewardesses. Or at least that's what Zach does when he flies. See, you shouldn't have sat in the front row. He has been quiet this whole time, so I better not poke that bear. Anyway, and so does a minitest. Minitest comes in 8 files. And honestly, there's about 3 that actually do anything. For example, one is a gay pride formatter. It'll rainbow color your test results, right? So while awesome, is probably not incredibly useful. So you can throw that one out, right? And there's a bunch of them that are kind of like autorun just requires other files, right? So it really comes down to about 3 different files to have a whole testing framework. And this is a little bit of what minitest look like. This is minitest-spec. Here, this is my favorite. I love minitest-spec. Looks very much so like RSpec, as we'll see going forward. And this is minitest TestUnit for those of you with some sort of complex and like TestUnit things. Now, one interesting thing to note about these 2 files I just showed you here is if you were to take the time and quickly type these into Vim or Sublime and then run them as Ruby, chances are they would run for you and the test would actually pass. And we did that without any gems. Oh, how the hell do we do that? It ships with friggin' Ruby, people. It's there. It is on your computer already. If you have Ruby greater than 1.9, and why don't you if you don't? Seriously, I still meet people like, I'm on 1.8.5. And you're like, whoa, what? My head explodes. So if you have Ruby 1.9 or above, you already have minitest. You already have what you need to run testing. It is also available as a gem. And the reason why it's available as a gem is it's easier to rev outside of the Ruby pipeline. So I highly recommend you do use the gem, just gem install minitest if you're doing it. But if you're on an airplane, you can't gem install, you're on a 15-hour flight from LA with no internet to Sydney, you can still write tests without needing bundler, without needing rubygems.org. It's got a very familiar syntax to RSpec. So who here has used RSpec before? Who here has never used RSpec? Now I know you're trolling me. Who here uses TestUnit? Oh, really? Oh, you poor thing. We'll buy you a drink later. We'll bring you around. Yeah. Well, you deserve some love, really. So as of Ruby 1.9, minitest actually replaced TestUnit in the Ruby core library. So it's like I said, it's there for you now. It replaced the old TestUnit. So let's take a quick look at the basics. And we're going to kind of look at the basics. We're going to look at some of the differences between minitest-spec, minitest-unit, RSpec. We'll look at some Rails, that sort of stuff here. Who here has heard of Rails? Anybody? Yeah, it's coming up. It's coming up. I think it's got a good future. Written by a Norwegian or Finnish man, I believe. Anyway, so minitest-spec. Here is a basic minitest-spec here. Describe something, do it. All right. It does something. These are all very RSpec-like. If you already know RSpec, you know pretty much what you need to know to use minitest. I could probably end the talk right there. Before and after setups and teardowns, all the good stuff. We can do nesting, just like we'd expect. We can do lets. For those of you who don't know what lets are, let kind of memoizes or memoizes, depending on which part of the world you're in, what's inside that code block there and lets you access another place. Just like RSpec, this has it. Also does subjects, just like RSpec. What's fascinating about this is I keep saying just like RSpec, but if you get a chance, go into a project that uses RSpec, do bundle open RSpec, and look how many files are there, and then do bundle open on all the files, on all the gems that RSpec requires to do RSpec, and then go and look at the minitest code and wonder over how much they can do in 3 files versus what RSpec does in about 6 gems. So it's important to see that you can do these different things. So context blocks. We can't do context blocks in minitest. It's a bit unfortunate. If you run that, you get an undefined method context. But we can fix that simply by aliasing that off. Very simple. Minitest-spec, alias context to describe. Very easy. It's just pure Ruby. Nothing special. We can do pendings with minitest. We have pending specs. There are 3 different ways to do that. It does something without a block. We can skip it. We can skip it with a message. Pretty straightforward. We run that. We get a bunch of S's here. So like I said, you already know this. You just need to start using it. You can skip it with a block. Yeah, say do skip. And then skip with a message. And you get a bunch of S's when you run that. All right, expectations. This is one of the things I like most about minitest. It's got really nice expectations that are very simple, very clean, and don't clutter up your object space like other testing frameworks, RSpec. For example, so these are the expectations that ship with minitest. They all start with must underscore. So when you're looking at the methods that are on your objects, you know which ones belong to minitest. Very simple. They all run with must underscore. They're not polluting the kernel object space or your object space. You've got these kind of nice ones here. You got must be empty, must respond to, must send, must have output, must output, all sorts of different things here. And the opposite is won't. So if you know one, you know the other, right? It must be or it won't be. It must match, it won't match. Very straightforward, very simple. And here's a little code kind of showing you what a bunch of them do here. So must raise, must include, won't include, must be nil, must be empty, all stuff. I just like the assertiveness of it too. It's not wishy-washy. It should be this. It should be equal, maybe, hopefully. It's like, no, it must include. And there's a couple really great things you'll see that are just so assertive about minitest. They like really put their foot down when designing it. So minitest-unit, for the one person who likes TestUnit, do you actually like TestUnit or do you just use it? Okay, well, hopefully we can convince you. So everybody, find him later. What's your name? Andrew Grimm. Find Andrew Grimm later and convince him why he should switch to a spec style versus a TestUnit style. And buy him a beer, because he deserves it. So here is what minitest-unit looks like. It's a bit lengthier. You have to create classes. We're going to test something. We're going to extend minitest-unit test case. And inside there, we're going to name our method something special, test underscore, and then whatever it is, the descriptive part that we want to test. And just so you know, minitest-spec actually kind of converts everything to this under the covers. So this really is kind of the metal part of it, if you will. But it's also ugly as sin. You get setup, you get teardown. If you want to do nested testing, like where we had nested describe blocks before, you just create another class and shove it inside of it. Why not? That sounds like fun. It's terrible. Just don't do it. There's no let. There's no subject. So you have to use like instant variables or other methods to kind of do all this for you. Pending, we have pending. We can skip, and we can skip with a message. That's about it. You can't have an empty method definition. Otherwise, it won't work. Assertions. So it has the same assertions, except an assert form here. So we can assert that it's equal. We can assert, respond to assert raises. And it just takes the expected and the actual as arguments to it here. So the nice part about this, the one benefit of this approach, is it doesn't infect your namespace any. It doesn't infect your objects, right? These are not, you won't find these methods on an object in your test. You won't find foo.assert or foo.assertMatch like you would foo.mustMatch because these sit outside of that. The opposite is refute. Is refuting that assertion. Again, a very strong language for this framework here. So mocking and stubbing, that's a very important part of what we do, especially when we want to keep our tests fast, keep it out of the database here. Who here does a lot of mocking and stubbing? Okay, cool. The rest of you should be doing a lot of mocking and stubbing. Your tests will go a lot faster. Testing support in minitest is very, very basic. I showed you there's only like 3 real files. And then there's mocking. I'll show you what it does here. It's very simple. You got a minitest-mock. You can create a minitest-mock object. And you can expect that when name is called, it returns widget. You can assert that, and then you verify that that happened. All right, so verify that all my expectations were met. If I would take out the step where I actually call the name method, I would get a mock expectations error telling me that I didn't meet all my assertions. All right. You can also stub on an object. It gives you the stub block here that we can use. So we can do the same thing. We'd say we have an instance of something. We're going to stub the method name and return thingy. And then everything inside of that do block will get thingy as opposed to widget. These are very well-named variables, by the way. This is what all my code looks like. It's all something, thingy, and widget, no matter what I'm building. Yeah, exactly. And then so inside there, you can kind of do what you want to do. But I would argue that Ruby has really great mocking and stubbing built into its language. We could do a whole talk about Ruby as a mocking language and as a stubbing language. It's there for you. Struct and OpenStruct, for example, great ways to mock out really complex classes and really complex functions just by using these two things. So here we can create an OpenStruct, and it's going to behave as if we had this object. So you have a really heavy network class, for example. Replace it with a struct or an OpenStruct, and just call methods off that do certain things, right? Pass those into your other objects. Because you should probably be using service wrappers and service objects for your classes anyway, so your code should be really easy to mock out using these techniques. You can also just redefine the method on the instance of the object. Right? This is very common. This is all in Ruby here. This is nothing special. Minitest isn't giving us this. There's no special mocking library here. I've got my instance of something. I'm redefining the name method on it to return what I want it to return. That's it. It goes away when the instance goes away. All built into Ruby. So minitest people were like, we don't need to do this sort of level of mocking. It's already there for you. Should you really need more than that, however, there are some great mocking libraries out there, Mocha, RR, FlexMock, others. This is also one of those things that people think, oh my God, I should write my own mocking framework, because how hard can that be? Don't. Go back to Ruby Tool. Whenever you think, oh, I should write my own, go to Ruby Toolbox and do a search for the thing you're about to write, and you realize there's 100 other people did that. And when you get a chance, also look for Sinatra clones, because there's none of those. None. Anyway, so use Mocha is actually my preferred favorite. I like Mocha when I'm not using just kind of plain Ruby. So custom assertions, we can very easily create custom assertions. Who here has created custom assertions in RSpec? Okay, a few people. So like RSpec has a semi-complicated to complicated DSL depending on how far you want to go with your assertions. And custom assertions are great. I write them all the time. Like one of the examples I always give is a must send to 404. Right? So if I hit an application as part of my test, I want to make sure that it renders a 404 page and renders a 404 status. So I always write a custom assertion that does that sort of thing. It's really nice. It cleans up your code. You create a nice little DSL for your application's code in tests. We can easily do this in minitest in a much, much simpler way than we can with RSpec. So take this little example here. I want to create an assertion that's called must round to and won't round to. So 1.2 must round to 1, 1.7 won't round to 1. All right, we can do this really easily. So we can open up the minitest assertions module. We can create a new method called assert equals rounded, or we can call it whatever we want. That's what I chose to call it. Takes the rounded number, so that'd be 1, and the decimal, 1.2. And then we just make sure it's equal. We assert the rounded equals the decimal rounded, and we give it a little message. That's it. That's our assertion. That's the whole syntax for doing it. All you're doing is calling the assert method underneath. This needs to return true. If it doesn't return true, it returns that string. And the same thing for refute equals rounded. We're just changing, whether it's equal or not. It's very simple. That's it. There's no complicated DSLs involved. It's just call the assert, give it something that equals true or false, and give it a message. Now this is where it gets really fun. We have to do something with these methods. We've created them, but they're not sitting on any of our objects. Minitest won't put these assertions on your objects until you tell it to. And you do that by calling the infect an assertion method. Exactly. I love this. Like, honestly, minitest is great just for that, just for the language, if you learn anything else. So we only want these on numerics. We don't care if strings round to other numbers. We shouldn't care if dates round to other numbers. So we can just do numeric.infect an assertion, and then we give it equals, cert equals rounded, and then its spec counterpart, which is must round to. And we do the same thing for the refute. And that's it. We now have a passing minitest custom assertion. Pretty easy. No complicated DSLs here. So Rails, this is that little framework that I was telling you guys about earlier. You can use the minitest-spec-rails gem. There is a minitest Rails gem, which doesn't work with Rails 4.1, and I don't believe the author has any desire to make it work. If you know the author and want to yell at them, please do, because it had some really nice little rake tasks and really nice little hooks built into it. But the minitest-spec-rails gem is pretty nice. It does need a little bit of love. It's new to kind of take the place of minitest-rails, so it doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but definitely check it out and feel free to open some PRs. There's some quick, low-hanging fruit I'm going to show you that people could easily do. This is not my gem, by the way, so I'm not trying to get people to do the work for me. I'm just too lazy to do it myself. So we can create a test helper here, and we can require minitest-spec, and you can add all sorts of things you want to the active support test case, checking pending, and before and afters, and some contexting and stuff. Very simple, straightforward stuff. Minitest expectations. If you open that up, you can infect an assertion right on your it blocks here. So I always take and infect must redirect to, must render template, and must respond with right into my it block, so I don't have to call like response dot must redirect to. I can just do must redirect to. And don't bother copying all this down. This will all be in the slides later. For those of you who want to just cut and paste it, it'll be there for you. You do need to create a little rake task here, but again, this is low-hanging fruit. If you want to get into this gem, I'm sure the author would love it if you created a rake task and shoved it in there for them. But one of the nice things about minitest here, which we haven't looked at, but looking at it in the context of Rails is quite nice, is you don't need a special runner to run your test. It's just Ruby. Right? It's already baked in there, so you don't need to run rake and then something or some RSpec and then what have you. You can just run it using pure Ruby. This is running a model test in my Rails folder here. I've included the test directory as part of the search path, so I can do require test helper at the top, and it works just fine. And you can do all your standard stuff using minitest-spec in Rails in terms of getting and putting and posting and all that sort of stuff. It's all baked right in there for you, nice and easy. If you like Guard, people who here uses Guard? Guard is awesome. You should be using Guard for everything. I use Guard to watch my children, to make me breakfast in the morning. I use Guard to tell me when I need to poop. You laugh, but it's true. I'll go into that later. I've got a little device, and never mind. So, okay. So this is my Guard file here. There's a Guard init, Guard minitest init that'll generate something very similar to this, but I like to throw this in the slides so that when you go back and look at the slides later, you have a nice little Guard file you can run, grab and run with. The mgem by QRush, Nick Ronto, is a really cool little gem to kind of enhance minitest just a little bit. One of the nice things about it is you don't need to pass in the -i flag. It automatically adds the test folder, adds the spec folder for you, so it knows where to look for things. And it also has the ability to run a test at a certain line number. So that's not part of minitest, and that's a big thing I love to do is to run tests on line 37. But it only runs tests on line 37. So make sure all your tests are at line 37 when you want to run them. Wouldn't that be awesome? The gem was just hard-coded to that. Just, fuck it. It has to be line 37. You can do Capybara if you want to, if you're big into Capybara. The minitest Rails Capybara gem. Right, lets you do features and scenarios and all that good stuff. So wrapping up, right, it's got a very familiar syntax to you. If you're used to RSpec, you probably watch those slides and go, okay, I already know this. Like, why the hell am I even here? It's 95% of the functionality of RSpec is wrapped right into those like 3 or 4 files. Think about that. 95% of RSpec is in those files. What the hell is RSpec doing in that other 5% that requires like a half a dozen gems and like hundreds of thousands of lines of code. Okay, and maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. Not hundreds of thousands of lines of code, 100,000 lines of code, easy. It's incredibly lightweight. And if you don't believe me, here is my gemfile.lock for one of my RSpec projects. These are all the gems that RSpec requires when I load it up here. And this is, by the way, this is not even RSpec Rails. This is just a gem that I used RSpec on. So RSpec Rails requires a whole bunch more. It ships with Ruby. Right? This is already on your computer. You don't need to install anything else. And the slide I always forget here is it's fucking fast. Go and benchmark RSpec versus minitest. It is stupidly fast. And testing is one of those things, let's be honest, we always have a problem with speed. Right? Rails testing in particular is really, really slow. Minitest gives you that little extra push, helps you get through a lot faster. Right? Every second counts in what we do. Because how else are we going to tweet in that time span? I always like really slow tests, because it gives me an opportunity to go check Facebook, tweet, go to Failblog, and then tweet those, and other stuff like that. But anyway, so I'm just going to wrap this up here. There's a bunch of resources. Definitely recommend going and checking out all these things here, the minitest gem, some quick references, a whole bunch of other stuff. Metacast.tv, my screencast site. There's 3 different minitest-spec, minitest-rails, and testing Sinatra. All use minitests, so when you use that free RubyConf, Ruby AU 2014 coupon, you can go and watch all those for free. And that is it. So, questions? Questions, yes.
So, you mentioned it covers 95% of what RSpec provides.
Yep.
So what's that 5% I'm missing out on?
What's that 5% you're missing out on? That's a great question. So one of the biggest things you're probably missing out on is the ability to tag your tests. So for example, one I always use like with VCR. Right? You want to put a little VCR tag in your tests so that you know, so VCR knows which tests to run VCR on. Or if you want to run little tests that say little flags so you know you can run a group of tests based on a little flag. You can't do that with minitests. However, there is a minitest gem that lets you do that. So there is a bunch of minitest gems out there if you really want that kind of pull in that other 5%. I typically never use it. I can't even remember the name of the gem because I just never use it. But it is out there. So that's like the biggest feature I think you're going to miss out on. The other thing, the other part you're missing is it's not as slow as RSpec. It also doesn't bring in all those extra files. I don't know, it's but that's the big feature you're probably missing out on. From the corner.
Hi. So
Hi.
how difficult is it to convert all your RSpec tests to minitests?
That's a great question. How difficult is it to convert all your RSpec tests to minitests? The answer would be probably not very hard. A few well-placed regexes would probably do it, but don't. Don't do it. If you already have, and I can't stress this enough, if you already have a big existing test suite, if you only have like 3 tests, then yeah, maybe convert it over. If you already have a large test suite, stay with what you're using. Don't go and rip out all your tests and start over again or convert them all because you'll probably introduce bugs in your tests. And you don't want to do that. But if you have a new project, certainly use minitest. And a follow-up question.
But what if the performance is a big issue?
Oh, what if the performance is a big issue? How slow are your tests? Do you mind me
Very
asking?
slow.
Very slow. Oh, that very quantitative number, very slow. Yes, I've also had very slow tests before. I would argue that if your tests are on the scale of very slow, as opposed to just slow, you'd probably want to look at other things first before rewriting them all in something like minitest. Minitest is going to eke out a nice little performance gain for you, but it's not going to take your test from very slow to fast. Right? You want to look at stubbing and mocking and pulling out your database calls. Chances are you probably have a ton of those, and that's the #1 thing that's slowing down your tests, I would imagine. Network calls, if you're actually talking to other applications from your tests, consider using VCR to kind of get rid of all that. So there are places you can improve that are going to give you much bigger wins than converting over to minitest. Definitely. So, other questions? Yes, over in the corner. He's bringing a microphone to you.
Well,
Does a minitest give you the ability to do the shared expectations you can in RSpec? The should behave like or whatever it is?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So that's part of the 5%. So can you do the shared expectations? That's part of the 5%. However, you could just include a module that includes kind of those sorts of things and just have methods that you can call. You can also create your own custom expectations to do those things, your own custom assertions too. So again, they kind of said, you know what, if you really need this functionality, Ruby already has it built in. We don't need to give you a fancy DSL that takes up, 200 lines of code, to run in another file to require. Just use modules or or assertions, it's already built into Ruby. So that's part of the 5%, but there probably is a gem out there that gives you shared expectations if you really need it, or just use Ruby, because Ruby's pretty awesome. It does a lot for you. Other questions? Anybody else? Yes, one more in the back. Last question. We're running behind, so I just speed through this a little bit.
So does minitest is mostly integration with Travis or something?
Minitest, it does work with Travis, yeah. I mean, so Travis will run pretty much anything Ruby-ish these days, and if Josh was here, he could definitely answer this question better than I could. But yeah, it'll run, all my stuff runs on minitest, and it all runs just fine on Travis, because Travis is awesome. And we should all give Josh a big hug and kiss when we see him later. And I think that's it. I think I'm out of time. Yeah, we were running late this morning. So thank you, everybody, very much. I appreciate it.